70s. Bullet shell, 303. I'll get the date off that later. That's in pretty good nick.
Now what you've just witnessed is how it usually plays out when you find a bullet shell. You go, oh, okay, bullet shell, cool. But sometimes for a lot of people, that's where it ends. They're just, oh yeah, bullet shell, 303, or whatever, you know, or just a bullet shell, the way it goes in the finds bag. When I first started finding bullet shells, I was interested to learn as much as I could from every find. And so when I discovered that when I cleaned them up that they had a head stamp on them, you can gain a lot of information from the head stamps. Now this last hunt revealed some stuff that I didn't even know before. These are bullet shells that I haven't found before. And I want to share with you the story of the things that I discovered about these very bullet shells. So this round here you'll see on the top has a K, 1941, and W and 1. Now the W stands for armor piercing, and the 1 is Mark 1, representing Mark 1 armor piercing round. Now the K is the manufacturer, which is Kynosh. I hope I got that right. And when you see the full date, 1941, often with bullet shells, it has just the last two prefixes. So 41 would be most common to be seen on a shell. And on this is the 303 round, so it's 1941. What that indicates is that this is of a high quality and to be used by the Royal Air Force. And this was made in the Kynosh factory in Britain.
126. It's definitely in the 70s. Screaming out to me. Bullet shell. Some of these could be World War I, but I'm going to guess World War II.
In the next shell that I cleaned up, you'll see that there's a B and a V1 and a Z. Now the prefix for incendiary round is B. And the Z represents the propellant inside, which was nitrocellulose. The full date again was for the RAF, Royal Air Force, and the arrow that you see on this shell was 1940 to 41, the Ministry of Supply Factory, Green, Cheshire. Now, incendiary ammunition contains a compound that burns rapidly and causes fires. The B Mark 6, as you see on here, was packed with nitrocellulose, and a small steel ball was placed in the tip of the bullet to ensure that the chemical exploded on impact. The B Mark 6 was a true incendiary rather than tracer ammunition. They were first issued in June 1940 and tested operationally in the Hawker Hurricane and the Supermarine Spitfire in the battles over Dunkirk. The explosive power coupled with the flash on impact, which guided their aim, was appreciated by pilots that were firing them. By 1942, the standard loading for fixed 303s was half loaded with armor piercing and half incendiary bullets of the 303s. Now, for a start, I didn't even know that planes and interceptor fighters were firing 303 bullets. But it makes ammunition. It makes sense because they for rifles, and they can shoot a long way, so high velocity. So something I learned that I didn't know.
And we've got an 80s here. There's something there. Oh, you ripper. You ripper. I reckon these guys in World War II, they fired these big guns and said, I've got to take one of these home. What's that, 50 cal shell? Done this before on other sites. People come back from the wars and bring, you know, one or two of these and stick them on the mantelpiece. Say, yeah, I fired those, mate. I gave the enemy heck, you know. Look at that.
Okay, so now we're going to go on to this bigger shell, the bigger round. The 1942, you see stated on this shell, 1942, the full date. The RG on it stands for the Royal Ordnance Factory, Radway Green, England. So these, all three of these so far have been made in Britain. That may have been a common thing, I don't know, but this is, as you can see, a 20mm round. These can be used in anti-aircraft, anti-materiel rifles, anti-tank rifles, to aircraft autocannons and anti-tank guns. The first examples of Supermarine Spitfires entered service with the Royal Air Force Fighter Command in March 1941. The majority of Spitfire 5s were armed with two 20mm cannons and 4 machine guns, affording greater chance of success against armour plating in other aircraft. Now, with all this, I started to, early in the piece, started to jump to the conclusion that, wow, somebody has brought back this 20mm round and this incendiary rounds and armour piercing rounds, because I started to connect the dots only really today, because I only found out that there was 20mm cannons, auto cannons, on the Spitfires and Hurricanes. So then I'm thinking somebody has had something to do with the Air Force or whatever, or flew in them and kept 20mm shell, the incendiary round and the armour piercing round, a shell from each as a keepsake. Maybe they flew, maybe they didn't, maybe they found them here, I don't know. This is where you start to get to a point you think, wow, these were in interceptor fighter planes like these two that we've mentioned, Hawker Hurricane and the Spitfire. But then there was other notes attached to this, and this came from, there's a lot of this I've taken from sites on the internet that I've found, but I'm sharing with you the things that I learnt just from these 3 shells that I'd never seen before. It's interesting to note that the Royal Air Force only kept cartridges in store for 2 years, after which time any unused cartridges were passed to the Army. So just because you find a fired 4-digit code like 1941 303 doesn't necessarily mean that it came from a Royal Air Force aircraft. Also, I started to jump to the conclusion perhaps these were fired from planes in the Battle of Britain, that's why they kept them. Well, fortunately, Battle of Britain, as some people would have already connected the dots already, was 1940. So was the Battle of Dunkirk. So either way, this has taught me a great deal from these 3 shells. And at the end of the day, there's a high possibility, for the fact that there's one of each, and I've never found these before. Other people may have, but chuck my glasses off. Never found with these markings before, and the 20mm. Now there was the 20mm auto cannons on these planes, and the incendiary and the armour piercing, and all these are made in Britain, and I found them all together on the one site. You start to wonder, but really these are answers that we will never get, because I don't know who lived there, how long ago, and you sit there and you think, well, did somebody bring them back as a memento from war, having witnessed them or flown these planes, and later they passed away or whatever, and somebody's just thrown them out when the person's passed away, and then they've just been left in the ground. Who knows? But just want to share this with you. It's been a really cool experience. I'm really going to hang on to these. Just knowing the history and how these all all on the one side. It makes me lean towards that. Perhaps that's what I want to believe, but you tell me, what do you think? That's some pretty good coincidence that these exact type of rounds were used in these planes, and that all three, that would be the 20mm auto cannon, incendiary, and the armor piercing, all on the one site. You tell me. Alright guys, that's it for now. I hope you like first green screen I've ever done. You take care, good luck out there, and bye for now. And don't forget, clean your head stamps, and you can learn as much as what I've learnt today, but for yourself.